Okay, Don. So, just for the listeners who aren't familiar with yourself, if you'd like to just give us a little bit of an introduction about who you are and what you do, please.
So my background, I was trained as an exercise physiologist. Back, I went to university in Ohio at Ohio State University back in the early '80s. I was an athlete. I wrestled there and struggled with injuries dramatically early on, and had to find a solution to this. So my original course of study was animal science. I had every expectation of going home feeding beef cattle for the rest of my life. I grew up on a big farm in eastern Ohio, and and I was a good enough wrestler that I could walk on the wrestling team, but but struggled with injuries, had to find solutions to this, and just fell in love with human physiology. And so, because of eligibility rules, I have a bachelor's degree in animal science, but I went ahead and did my graduate work in exercise phys, and worked in the industry, ran a health club, did personal training. I mean, I was a paid personal trainer in 1986. So I'm kind of an old OG in that space. But just kept working through, and then started teaching university by the late 80s, and have been a university professor pretty much ever since, off and on. I've never tried to be tenured or anything. I've always enjoyed teaching at small schools, developing programs, helping people move through. And I've always kept a foot in the industry. So whether it's, I spent time working for Polar heart rate monitors, spent, had a lot of work with them, and have always engaged technology as a tool. Um, and so that's kind of my background. I've 2015 through 18, I was a sports scientist back again at Ohio State with the wrestling team. Learned a lot. This is where we did a lot of our HRV work, and had some. We started looking at HRV back when I worked for Polar.
Hmm.
That Polar had built HRV tools into their heart rate monitor systems. Back then, they called it like own zone and own index and things like that. But these were all based off HRV measures. But then, later, in recent history, we're using HRV diagnostically. What's wrong with an athlete? Why are they struggling? We'll use it prescriptively. Is this athlete ready for the workout that we're getting ready to give them today? And we actually got to where we could use it for selection. That in 2018, we sent our entire starting lineup to the national tournament that year. First time in school history that we've qualified the whole starting lineup. We had 8 All-Americans, most in school history. The 2 guys that did not make All-American, I could have told you who they were the first day of the tournament, because they did not have the necessary recovery, readiness, resiliency. They didn't have the necessary tools to be able to win 5 matches to make All-American. So this is where of HRV really started to develop. Um, left left the direct coaching business then at the end of 18, because a friend of mine that I'd worked with along the way in had left. We worked together at a wearable company in New Mexico. And he left and went into cannabis up in Oregon, and I left and went back to Ohio State. That's when I started my work at Ohio State. But the whole time he's asking me questions. What do you know about cannabis and HRV, and what's going on here? He gave me the opportunity to go work in the cannabis industry in 19, and in late 18, early 19. And I did a head first dive into the deep end of the pot pool,
Hmm.
and I learned about this thing called the endocannabinoid system. The endocannabinoid system, part of your central nervous system. Um, we know about it because of cannabis and the research for cannabis and how it works. But the endocannabinoid system, Chris, when you exercise, we produce a ligand. We produce like a little hormone in our body that's called anandamide. And anandamide is called the Zen molecule. It's what causes it's what causes a drop in anxiety. It's one of these very efficient central nervous system monitoring molecules. It's the reason we exercise. It should be chapter 2 of Exercise 101, the anandamide and its effect on the endocannabinoid system. Well, when you look at the endocannabinoid system and HRV, HRV is really a measurement of the status of the endocannabinoid system. It's a status of your system's readiness. It's a measured status of, and so there are molecules, there are underlying processes that enhance that, and so it's what brought us to where we're at here today.
Wow. So when you were at the university, were you directly taking out research? Did you do any research projects at all?
Well, we never did research that we intended to publish. So so listen, I think that's what sports science is, and I define it as creating data streams that give coaches and athletes the ability to make better decisions. I was never interested in publishing for publishing's sake. I was interested in doing research and collecting data for my athletes and my coaches so that they could be better. And I think this is an opportunity for all personal trainers and strength coaches that the scientific process, Chris, is number one. We learn about information. We create a hypothesis. If I want to run faster, jump higher, lose weight, get stronger, here is an experiment. So we create an experiment. We create a list of exercises. We apply them to the individual. A lot of times we measure the results. We'll measure, well, if this person can do a greater weight for more repetitions that we can interpret a new max from. So we're making progress there, or we're not making progress. It's not, it is or it isn't. It's moving us towards a goal. Well, that's the ultimate scientific process. But the thing that people like you and I have to learn to do is close the loop on that. That when we make a discovery that may be contrary to the dogma of our business, that we have the courage, we have the courage, and we have the understanding of the data that we've collected to go back and make a modification to the program. So much about strength and conditioning and is about dogmatic belief. I do it because this is what my predecessor did. This is what I learned to do, so this is what I do, and that may not necessarily be scientific. Certainly at one point in time, but the question is, Chris, you and I are very different people. We're both humans. We're both male, but we have a different genetic profile, and where something may affect you one way, it may affect me another. And ultimately, it's our ability to gather this N of 1 data that we can then use to create personalized programs and identify strengths and weaknesses and what our clients do to help them thrive more.
Yeah. So was HRV the set variable which allowed you to do that from an N=1 perspective, in the sense of different responses created different HRV results, and then you modify that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll send you a link to a presentation that I did of the program, and it's on YouTube, and so your viewers can see it. But yeah, I got involved with the wrestling program because they had a wrestler that was struggling. And at the time I had a lab in my house, and the wrestling coach brought this kid over, and we did testing, and what we saw, Chris, is that this kid was in, we look at overtraining syndrome in 5 stages. And in training, we want to stay in 1, 2, reach into 3. But when we start going into stage 4, we're starting to risk some adrenal failure, things like that. When we get to stage 5, they're hosed. But he brings a wrestler over to me that's easily stage 4, possibly stage 5. And I said to him, using HRV to do the diagnosis. This is what we were using. And I said to the coach, I said, you have to stop training this guy like you're training the rest of your team. I realize you as coaches know what it takes to train national champions, But what I'm saying to you is this kid is maladapting to your training. Um, he's going the wrong direction. He can do the work, but the recovery is not there, and he's getting in trouble. So and the response was, so what do we do? And I said, well, you have to start training this athlete for what he's ready for, not necessarily what you think he should do. And this is a very talented kid. And once we ratcheted him back a little bit, and we were able to get the emergence of recovery in his system, and this takes place over about a 5-week period, all of a sudden his performance comes back, and he goes from where he's stealing matches to get through dual meets to where, you know, he placed in the Big Ten tournament, which is how we qualify for our national tournament. And then he goes to nationals and made All-American. He's one of the top wrestlers in the country out of that tournament. So from a diagnosis standpoint, we figured out he was maladapting to his training. We used HRV to, okay, how hard are we going to train today? What is going to be the stimulus that this person's body can accept and recover from? We measure, is he getting recovery? You wake up and you measure in the morning, are we recovered? Sure. Okay, we're ready to go then. And we can slowly titrate the workload to this individual's response. And that's the beauty of HRV. And you use HRV as a status diagnostic piece. Have I recovered from the work I did before? Am I ready for the workload you're getting ready to put on him? And then you can use heart rate measures, just straight up HR measures, to measure workload and intensity. And this is a good way to use technology to nurture athletes to the next level.
So how do you do the test? Is it a simple like finger pulse test, or what was your system?
There are a lot of technologies out there. Wearable technologies are exploding right now, and there's a lot of them. So back then, we were using a platform that was called Omega Wave, and we were using a platform that's called First Beat. Both of those are Finnish products. I think both of them at the time were based in Helsinki. And we were doing measurements. Either my First Beat system let me do 24-hour continuous measurements. They have a thing called a bodyguard that I could put on my athletes, and when they wrestled, we would just tape it down, so I'd get live data while we're wrestling. But more importantly, I got that nighttime resting data, which is just so important with HRV. Again, you know, that last point of the night before you begin your awakening cycle, to, you know, you're starting to break the fats. We're getting the dump of cortisol and some of those hormones that we used to wake up with. So we'd like to see that HRV right before that starts. I consider that my favorite HRV measurement. Now, if you can't get that for some reason, then you go ahead and you get it from, you know, right before my athlete walks into practice. If I measure them right before practice every day, all of a sudden that indicator gets pretty good for individuals. So we did both. But now we're using newer technologies like the Aura Ring and the Now Watch and Cardio Mood. There's a lot of good wearable data on the market. Not all of them are good. Everything I've mentioned, I trust. These are all these, you know, and we can now start to gather data and aggregate it to give individuals the ability to make better decisions.
And how much difference, or did you ever notice any like subjective versus objective differences in your athletes? So where they would feel like they feel great, like they want to train, but they do the measurements and be like, no, you don't really, your physiology doesn't suggest that.
That is the point right there, because there's a couple. Listen, elite athletes love to train. You know, there's a thing that comes with training that makes you feel good. The problem is that dopamine signal may not be consistent with what your readiness signal is. So where we love going in and just laying waste to ourselves in a room because we're getting a positive dopamine response, it may not be the right thing for you at that time that day. So yeah, this is exactly where we start to go back to. And in fact, I'll tell you a funny story. We by the third year of our program, we were measuring, instead of measuring guys one at a time, I had enough technology that I was measuring 16 guys every day. So our starting lineup and 6 more guys we were able to get HRV measures on. So, and in wrestling, we are a fall winter sport. We start wrestling and we start practices in August, starting to sharpen the saw in September. October, November, we're starting to cut weight. So that in January, we really come into our hard season. January, February, Big Tens are at the end of February, Nationals are at the beginning of March. So we're working our way through, and then Christmas comes along and we send the guys home. And they're home for a few days, and we get them back for about a 6 or 7 day training block right before we really go into our hard season. So I've got 5 or 6 days that I can really go deep and train them hard. And so the guys come back. I run an HRV study the first day they're back, and I got the worst HRV scores we had the entire season. Okay. We're thinking they're coming back, they should be fully engaged. And what we learned, Chris, is that the family stress is the worst kind of stress.
Mm.
They were back home, they weren't sleeping in the beds they normally sleep in on campus. You have all the family issues that go with that. So we all come from a different situation where family can be different. Trauma is an amazing is an amazing effector of our central nervous system, and family traumatizes better than most. So this was part of figuring this out, was how do we use this data to make decisions? And that was the beauty. We had a lot of discovery early, but then later in my time there, we learned, okay, how do we take this information we have and make training decisions with it, make recovery decisions with it, and integrate recovery modalities. We added float tanks, sensory deprivation float tanks to our program. And the last season I was there, we floated a wrestling team 140 times. It worked so well. But not everybody. Some it worked better for others, but it was only through the use of data and feedback that we're able to make decisions. Oh, this is your exercise program, works best for you this way. This is your recovery program. This is dietary. By having this HRV as this continuous marker, we can really make good decisions, because the other thing that happened, Chris, what I knew is that if I sent a wrestler to nationals with a nighttime resting RMSSD HRV measurement of less than 70 milliseconds, they would not make All-American. If I sent them with above 75, they would make All-American. And oh, by the way, my Olympic gold medalist had 125 milliseconds. My national champion had 100 milliseconds. So all of these things were tools that we could use in prepping these guys for their particular challenge.
And can you just explain the physiology behind the measurements that you just said there? So what are you actually measuring, and what's a good and bad reading?
Absolutely. So when we're looking at heart rate variability, we're looking at the difference in times between heartbeats. So if your heart rate is 60 beats a minute, you expect a beat every second. But we don't actually get it right on the second. The more recovered you are and the more fit you are, the more that will vary. So instead of being a straight beat, 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 it winds up being beat, 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 beat. You still get 60 beats in a minute, but they're variable in time between. And what that tells you is that your vagal tone, your vagal nerve, your representation of readiness is higher than when it's right before you die, your HRV will go to 0. Okay, so 0 is dead. Elite athlete is in the hundreds. The rest of us are in between. So we're constantly trying to do things to push that more towards a higher number than 0. So the physiology is that when when we apply a stress, we get a response, we get weaker. The body responds by pouring resources to that weakness. It super compensates. We get stronger with that, and that'll show up in an improved HRV. So, HRV is one of these things we want to see a cycle, that if I have a high HRV, I want to apply stress and drive it down and give myself a recovery cycle. If my HRV is very low, I have to be very careful about what stress I apply there, because I may not have the resources to be able to actively recover from the workout if I don't apply that stress appropriately. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, totally. And
stress, the
go.
and the important part of stress is that this isn't an evolutionarily based adaptive response. When we were hunter gatherers walking across the savannah and a tiger turned the corner and looked at us, we had a turning point right there. We either I get away or I'm lunch, one or the other. But so the body sees the tiger, dumps the resources, and the amygdala, the part of the brain that senses fear, sees this, dumps the resources to give you what you need to get away from the tiger. The challenge is today, Chris, is where our life is full of paper tigers, family, business, taxes, work, and we see everything our video games. Even that, I had one of my wrestlers in the last year I was there. I walk into the room and we're getting ready for Big Tens, and he says, Coach Moxley, he says, Call of Duty, he says, would that affect my HRV? And I said, Luke, your brain does not know the difference whether that's a computer shooting at you or a real person shooting at you. Your brain does not distinguish between the two. You're getting a sympathetic fight or flight response from this. And yeah, you pile that on top of all the other stuff we're doing, it's going to affect your recovery. So it was a data point that gave one of my athletes the ability to make a good decision as it relates to when and how long he plays video games at night before he goes to bed. So that's the beauty of using HRV as a key performance indicator.
And I take it for like a personal trainer who was using this for their like general population clientele or weight loss clientele. Would you be able to cross correlate with things like alcohol or lack of sleep because of work and food?
Alcohol and lack of sleep are the two that will just thrash your HRV. We actually did a little. There was an internal study, for lack of a better term. So an athlete drank 4 beers before they went to bed, and we measured HRV over 24 hours in both without alcohol and with alcohol. The 4 beers cut his recovery in half. So what was 8 hours of sleep and a potential 8 hours of recovery became 4 hours of recovery. The first 4 hours of sleep, he was still sympathetic. That alcohol was driving a sympathetic response. So yeah, alcohol is one of the biggest drivers of poor HRV. There's 3 big ones. Inflammation is a huge driver of poor HRV. So anything, as you get later in life, that same inflammation will become heart disease and neural problems and immune system problems. These will all become a challenge with inflammation, and it'll drive down HRV. So anything that you can do to lower inflammation will improve HRV. You can't fix HRV without good sleep. You have to have good sleep. And so someone who's struggling with sleep will struggle to recover. And I don't care if you have alcohol and poor sleep, I don't care how much exercise you put in on top of that, you're not going to get much of a response. You're going to struggle with that super compensation response. So it's critical. You can't just work hard. A lot of people work hard. It's the ones that can go ahead and take the benefit of the hard work via recovery to get the benefit to move on. And there's a lot of people that just train themselves into the dirt because they love that dopamine from the workout, because that's always there. You're always, again, this is a survival mechanism. Your body, again, when you start to train, your body equates that to fighting the tiger. And it gives you the resources that you need as long as you have them on board. It gives you those things to go ahead and recover. But if you pile it on too much, you get into this over recovery syndrome, you get into the adrenal problems, you get into all of these issues that come with an absence of good recovery that is represented in high HRV.
Cool. So let's do a hypothetical situation. You're a personal trainer. You've got a client in at 7 a.m. in the morning, and they come in. They said, "I've had 3 hours sleep last night. I was working on my computer or laptop till 12 midnight. I haven't eaten yet. Didn't eat much yesterday." You do the HRV, and it's completely on the floor, like it's terrible. But they've got a paid session with you. What do you do?
Well, we make sure that they learn the value of recovery. I mean, this is certainly an opportunity to teach.
Mhm.
If they, I was years ago, this was 30 years ago, I was sitting with a coach, a, a very prominent American basketball coach and his strength coach. And we were talking about this exact scenario.
Mhm.
And the strength coach's position, I get paid to train these guys. So when they come in at 6 in the morning and they haven't slept and they're going hard, it doesn't make a difference to me. I get paid to train them. And I said, fine, listen, I'm not arguing with you on that. Here's my point. That training that you're doing has no value.
Mhm.
Okay. You're not going to get a return on your investment. And listen, if someone's up on their laptop, I think it's almost better to talk to people in the construct of economics rather than physiology. That the economics is, listen, if you're making investments and you've got an investment protocol that's just not doing anything, why keep putting money into it?
Mhm.
And so now if I'm a trainer, I'm again, okay, so let me go back and I'm going to second double talk a little bit here a little bit. I don't believe in waking up in the morning, measuring my HRV and deciding what I'm going to do that day. What I believe in is setting a goal. Um, I put something out on the horizon. For athletes, that's really easy. There's always competitions and things that we figure. But for that executive, we've got to figure out what are we training for. And I use a term that I call trainable life events. Um, no one takes a picture of their scale and puts it on Instagram. No one takes a picture of their scale and hangs it on the wall. While everyone comes in and says, I'm training, I want to lose weight, that's the worst key performance indicator in the world, and no one follows it. What do people put pictures on the wall of? Vacations, family events, things that if I am more physically fit, I get more enjoyment from. If I'm that executive and I'm working hard and I'm going to take 2 weeks of holiday, I want to get the most out of it. So instead of the holiday being a recovery event, which it rarely is, by the way, we get the recovery process in place. And I think from a personal trainer standpoint, your ability to constantly reframe the mindset of the person that you're working with. John, you're coming in to train. Listen, I realize you had 3 hours of sleep last night. Our goal is to run the London Marathon, and it is 6 months away. And in order for you to achieve that goal, I need recovery from you. I can't train a wet noodle every day. I need someone coming in here that we can apply stress and build the process. So I need you when you're not here. I need the other 23 hours of the day to contribute to the process as well. I realize you think work is important and you needed to do that. And I don't, and it may be that's your judgment. But I want you, if it's not work, if it's just watching TV, if it's death scrolling, social media, if it's something like that, we need to start to take a look at where we prioritize. How important is Instagram compared to your trainable life event? How important is social media to your ability to achieve this goal of running a half marathon or a marathon or triathlon or whatever it is? Helping that individual reframe the context. Don't shame, but if I went to my accountant and said, listen, we put together a plan for my retirement and it just isn't working out. The accountant looks at it and says, well, you're spending too much money on eating out or whatever you're doing, and you're not following the plan we put together. it's back on me. It's not the accountant's fault my retirement isn't growing. It's my issue. It's my decisions. And we have to constantly, lovingly, considerately reinforce, okay, what are the practices? What can we do to get there? And as a scientist, also recognize, okay, is this a lifestyle issue for them, or is this a maladaptation issue for me? I if you have a CrossFit studio and you're used to leaving people laying on the floor in puddles of sweat, if someone comes in with a particularly poor HRV, you got to start to consider things like trauma. You got to start to consider things like, okay, there's other stresses in this person's life aside from what I'm doing. So just me setting them on fire when they come into my facility may not be the right thing. And as a personal trainer, as an exercise scientist, someone who makes decisions based on data and where we set the goals, then we can start to guide this individual towards their goal, which is what they're paying you for. And I think this is an important part to listen. There's some people that hire personal trainers because they know they got to exercise. They know they won't exercise unless they have the appointment. And hopefully the personal trainer is attractive so that while I'm training, I've got someone cute to look at. We know that's a big part of the business, and I don't want to minimize that. But there is a part of the business that is very scientific, very self-directed, and I think when a personal trainer understands this and learns to integrate this into their practice, they learn to separate themselves from their competition.
And did you used to see, obviously, if you're constantly tracking HRV with your athletes, did you see quite a consistent injury to HRV ratio?
Yeah, when you start tracking HRV, you stop getting injuries.
All right.
This is okay. So listen, as a strength coach and as an exercise scientist, my number one objective is keeping my athletes healthy. Okay, that's my main objective. I personally believe 95% of injuries in sport that we deal with is because we're sending an athlete into competition with not the appropriate resources. They're overtrained coming into the event. And again, if you're not tracking data, one of the things that we did, Chris, is that I had 3 different strength coaches that I had to deal with. But when the guys trained, regardless of the strength coach they were working with, one of the things I did, we had key exercises, deadlift, squats, bench we measured. I don't consider it a key exercise, but deadlift, squats, pull-ups, things like that were stuff that we measured every time they did it, we measured. So we would take their best set, the highest weight with the appropriate number of reps. We'd throw that into a form. We'd convert it to a 1 rep max for that day. And we constantly track that number, because if I'm training my athlete correctly, if I'm training my client correctly, I should constantly see an improvement in these metrics. If my athlete is on a bicycle that measures wattage, I should be able to see average heart rate and average wattage. And with the training process, average wattage should increase via heart rate, or heart rate should decrease. But that should be the training, that there should be a benefit there. I should get stronger all the time. If I'm doing strength training in my key exercises over the period of a year, let's say we do triples or quads if I take my, and there's all kinds of equations that you can do to calculate 1 rep max from a weight and reps. Constantly record that number should always be improving. And if it's not, you need to be able to explain why. With my wrestlers, we would lose some fitness during weight cut. So there was a factor that would come in and now as we cut weight better, that was less of an impact. Excuse me. But from a standpoint of a training improvement and looking at injury, if training load and recovery are right, injuries are cut dramatically. Listen, I can't stop the accident of someone rolling up on your ankle or something like that. I can improve your physiological status so that when you start to feel someone roll up on your ankle, you can escape that situation. But when you do this right, injury, and again, the best teams are the teams that get through competition without injury. This is, that's the other side of that equation. So absolutely, as HRV improved and our training improved, injuries dropped.
Amazing. So how did, if you could tell us a little bit more about the product that you came up with, is that back to the endocannabinoid system, or what was it that from the supplement? When did supplements start to become relevant in this?
Well, the supplements, listen, we all use supplements. The question is, do they do anything? More than placebo. But when I learned about when I was working in Florida, I learned about the endocannabinoid system. I learned about anandamide. I learned about these receptors. And again, you're in Manchester, England. I'm in the United States. I don't know what the laws are in England as it relates to things like CBD and other cannabis extracts. But in the states, we have, most of our states are now fully. We have cannabis fully available either through a medical or a recreational program. And so many times cannabis is about THC, the part that makes you high. Well, the thing is that cannabis plant has a lot of other ligands, has a lot of other molecules in it that are beneficial. And a lot of people have heard of CBD, cannabidiol. It's good. The precursor to CBD that comes out of the plant is called cannabidiolic acid, CBDA. This is a wonderful little molecule that really promotes recovery, really promotes status of that endocannabinoid system, so it's able to react. There's other plant molecules in there. One that we use in particular, it's called beta caryophyllene. And these molecules hang on inflammatory receptors. They hang on pain receptors. They hang on the receptors that we need to recover. And with the absence of these molecules in our diet, we've got to ingest them somehow. So we created a supplement it's a hemp extract. So hemp means very low THC. It's very high, excuse me. It's very high in CBD and CBDA, and it also has beta caryophyllene. And then we combine this with a fish oil, an omega-3 fish oil, DHA EPA, that also has what's called specialized pro-resolving mediators. So SPMs, I mean, you can go to Amazon and search SPMs. SPMs are the biologically available end of the resolving cycle of the inflammation cycle. It resolves that. So we actually build these into the product. So those key molecules that we need for recovery, improve endocannabinoid system status, lower inflammation with DHA, EPA, and SPMs. Those are all in the single supplement that we developed called HRV Plus. So we've seen this emerging in this country, and again, I unfortunately I don't know cannabis in Britain, in Great Britain, but that this is what we deal with in this country and where the benefit comes from.
And have you had any chance to do any research on the supplement?
Yeah, we've run a stage 1 clinical trial, open label trial, and using wearable technology. And what we saw was a 10% improvement in HRV pretty much across the board. It ranged, listen, we had, of the 20-person study, we had 3 non-responders, but we had people who improved HRV up to 28%. But again, 10% across the board. And then we also ran that using the WHO wellness survey. We saw a 23% improvement in that in individuals' response to that WHO survey over 30 days. So we've been getting wonderful testimonials that as you stabilize your endocannabinoid system, all of a sudden sleep becomes more effective. And one of the things that people are telling us is that they started taking the supplement and they're sleeping just beautifully. And again, you can't improve HRV unless you lower inflammation, improve endocannabinoid system tone, and that will result in good sleep. that will result in the tools that you need for recovery. So that's how the supplement works. There's nothing here that you can't get on your own. But again, we live in a time when there's a lot of stresses and focuses and things like that. And again, someone feels the need to work on the computer until 3 a.m. for work. When I hear that, I laugh, because we were working with a special operations team, a naval special operations team. And what they did was they took their operators and they sleep deprived them. And then they had them go do an operation, and then they had those individuals grade their performance in the operation. And they all graded themselves as doing very well. But at the same time, they had an observatory group watching them, and they scored them as well. And the group that was observing and not exhausted scored their performance dramatically lower than what they self-scored. So many times our brain will play a trick on us that we think, oh, I need to do this work, I need to get this other. Truth is, that work is probably trash. If you're not doing that work in an environment where you're not somewhat optimized and ready, whether it's physical work or psychological work, you're going to struggle, because the resources are not there. If I'm not exercising, I'm not creating another molecule called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. This comes along with anandamide, and it's the benefit of exercise. But if I'm so overtrained that I'm producing so much cortisol just to get through the workout, I'm not getting those benefits. So, part of this is, again, taking a step back, and the role as the personal trainer, it's not to lecture, it's not to preach, it's just to make sure they have the information they need. Again, sports science, personal training, giving individuals the ability to use data to make better decisions. I'm working with a group down in LA right now, and they're applying HRV technology at a corporate level. So they have a technology that measures HRV through the camera on their phone. So there's no barrier to entry to anyone in a company beginning to measure HRV. You don't have to make a $30,000 investment to hang technology on everybody and have that whole learning curve. All you need is a phone and this quick, cool little app. But they start to build this big data set, and they give individuals the ability to look and say, well, you know what? Today's a push day. I have high HRV. I'm ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and challenge myself. I'm going to push myself today. But I might have a steady day. There might be a day where I'm like, listen, team, I had a bad night last night. Don't expect much from me today. In fact, it's probably best that I kind of back away and recover today so I can be strong tomorrow. These are the things that are emerging. And Chris, we're not even close to the end. Technology is coming so fast, and it's getting so good. Our ability to integrate machine learning on top of behavior collection gives us, my dream is that someday you'll wake up in the morning, and when you pick up that phone, it will have aggregated nighttime sleeping habits, sleep scores, HRV, things like that. It will have gone back and looked at, what did I do in the last day, 3 days, week? What is my status? And then give me a message of, you might want to think about this today. Or, the ability to aggregate all the data that's coming in that we have access to right now is painting a wonderful future. But it doesn't change the fact that the professional, your listeners, those trainers, have the ability to pick up some of this. You don't need AI to figure this out. You need coaching. And as we coach better, the other things will come. But it's really a wonderful time. And if you're not looking at this technology, you're probably kidding yourself. It's, if you're training someone and you're using 2 fingers on the carotid to measure heart rate, you're 3 decades behind the curve. The idea that someone's training without a heart rate monitor on is foreign to me. I don't know how. It's practically malpractice in my mind. And then the next step on that is, as I work with an individual and we're understanding training, recovery, the role of trauma, There are all these things in between, and I'm not putting some kind of an indicator on that either with my Aura ring or my cardio mood or things like that. You know what? This is the next generation of physical prep people, professionals.
So what phone apps would you recommend? So if somebody listens to this and go, right, I want to start this tomorrow, what apps would you be recommending?
You know, listen, I think there's a really good app. I love the team at Elite HRV. I think they've rebranded themselves to Screen now, but they have a wonderful little HRV app that runs on their phone. And if you already have a heart rate transmitter, you can start to play around. Like if you have like a Polar H8 or a Polar H10, probably needs to be an EKG device, not a PPG device. It's really hard if I love Aura, and if this is something you want to explore, get this technology yourself. Go buy an Aura ring, put it on your finger. You know, this is a professional investment. Don't buy your technology for the first time and put it on your client. You buy listen, you would do an exercise with a client that you haven't done before and can instruct correctly. So go get a cardio mood, go get an Aura ring, go get a Now Watch. These are all devices that are available, right there in your, Cardio Mood's an English product. Now Watch is out of the Netherlands. Aura's worldwide. It's an American device, came out of Finland, but it's now an American company. These are all good tools. And if this is what you do professionally, get your head around it. I'm a bit of a freak. Most days I'm wearing 4 or 5 HRV devices. Not because I have a question about what my HRV is, it's because I'm trying to figure out if the devices are accurate. Does the device bring me the data that I expect it to bring me, that I've confirmed with other trusted sources, or is it a bit outside the range? So I'm constantly looking at things like that. And listen, the technology that we have today in 5 more years will completely be evolved. But physiological practices and the physiology of humans will be largely the same. In the absence of an extinction event, we're going to have a similar diversity and physiological process going on. So again, getting this tool on yourself. One of the other recommendations I make, Chris, is that if you're working with this on a team basis, it's a mistake to say, hey, HRV is important and I'm going to go spend $5, $10, $30,000. I'm going to equip my team. I can virtually guarantee you that program will fail, because there's a lot of people that don't understand it. And you go back to straight behavioral psychology and you see why it fails. But if I have someone on my team that's struggling, if I have an athlete, or if I have a person that I'm working with in my training that's struggling, that's looking for an answer, trying to figure out why am I not making the progress I should be making, introduce this technology. Use it yourself first, understand it, introduce the technology, and then you've got a tool that you can start to really move the needle with. And again, when you look at sleep from a supplement standpoint, in the absence of sleep, HRV does not improve. Period, end of story. So you have to build in recovery protocols. Listen, this could be a recovery protocol could be the client comes to you, they have a piss poor HRV. Instead of dragging their butt through the weight room with their traditional workout, blood flow restrict it, do a much lighter workload, get a training benefit. This is where the professional comes into play. You make the decision on the modality. Instead of putting them into a spin class where it's 1,000 ways to stay in zone 4 for an hour, put them on a bike in zone 2 and keep them there. Figure out and get a podcast on them, get something in front of them so that they can distract their attention a little bit, but keep them in zone 2, zone 3 for an hour. That will be an incredibly beneficial process that you can use. And then, you know what, if they're coming in with a sky high HRV, pound them. Really go after it if they're ready for it. That's someone who's ready for that kind of a workout. But that's what the professional does. Listen, there may be some people that come in. Listen, all I want you to do is go sauna. Just go sauna for 30 minutes. That may be the right treatment protocol for that person that day based on their readiness.
Mm. And so with the supplement that you provided, how do people get access to that? Is that available in the UK as well?
We're working on that. It's certainly available in the US. You go to modemethod.com, www.modemethod.com. That's the website that we sell it at. I was in a conversation last week about European distribution. I don't think we're there yet, but we're working on it. There's ways around this. So I apologize for your British listeners, your European listeners, that we may not be able to service that right away. If you reach out to us, if you reach out to us through our customer service on the website, listen, if we can get it to you, we'll figure out a way. We're working on that though.
Okay.
Cannabis laws are funny, you know.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, thank you so much for your time with everything, Don. That's been a fascinating chat. And you've got all your socials as well. So do you have a favorite platform that you like to share information on, or are you regular on any socials at all?
At a professional level, LinkedIn is where you should connect with me. That's where I communicate. If you connect and say, "Hey, I read your profile. You look like an interesting person," I'll reject that. If you send me a question based on a physiological question or something in my profile, then I accept it and I engage with most people. I typically push most of my scientific information, teaching stuff out across Twitter. The question is, what the hell is Twitter going to be in another year? So I'm not sure what's going on there. It's Don Moxley at everything. So you can find me, Don Moxley, on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube. I do push things across Twitter still. Hopefully they'll figure out what's going on there and keep that alive. My Instagram is very you're going to see a lot of photos about our travel. You'll see our social media team does a nice job. So, following Mode Method on Instagram or following it, and I'm not a huge Facebook guy. I do have a Facebook account, but I mainly use it for lurking and seeing what else is happening in the world. But LinkedIn's where you find me. Twitter's where I typically push information, and my family you'll see on social on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Don. It's been brilliant, and all the best with pushing this whole Mode Method venture.
Chris, I appreciate your time, access to your tribe. I mean, this is an honor